Hmm. Hello, Peter.
Greetings, my friend.
How are you, Peter?
Cold. No, it's cold here. I'm warm. Okay, but
Yes. What's the temperature today in Moscow?
It's like -3, but it's what I was thinking how to describe it. It's a full metal jacket winter here. I mean,
Right.
we got the wind, we got the blizzards, we got the snow, we got snow and a little extra snow. We got a lot of snow this year. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, no, like I said, but -3 is by Russia standards very mellow. I mean,
how do I don't, you know how I defined cold? I don't look at the temperature. I don't look at minus whatever. Can my dogs take it? That's how I define cold. Okay. So if Buddy can only take 3 minutes before he starts shaking, you know, that's cold. Okay. Other than that, I don't care. Okay. I like winter. It doesn't bother me.
All right. Let's begin. Yes. So no, I quite agree with you. I think winter is fine. The snow, however, is very unpleasant. It's very bad for your shoes. And then when the snow freezes, and then you have ice, and then it gets a little dangerous to wander around.
We can all identify, maybe only on one level in this universe, in this lifetime, we can identify with Joe Biden because we do the Biden shuffle. Okay. But he isn't in winter. We're in winter. He's doing the shuffle. We're doing the shuffle, but we're doing it in winter. Okay.
Right.
Doing the Biden shuffle.
That's right. I guess, you know, you always have this feeling when it's January and it's one days like this, you think, well, you know, global warming isn't really such a bad thing. I mean, I wouldn't mind a little bit of global warming. So
actually, what people tell me, it's actually reverse. With it, the Earth is getting colder, not, and it's because of these changes that we get all of these dramatic weather incidences. I'm not going to weigh in on it. I mean,
no.
I will tip my hand. George and I, being the great surveyors of we're like the Lewis and Clark of modern history, okay? And, you know, I remember Al Gore. Okay, come on, George, you remember, you remember Al Gore, okay? So, I mean, how many other people have sold books and documentaries, you know, always trying to hype things, okay? Having said that, I suggest everybody go see the film, Don't Look Up. I thought it was very, very interesting, okay? It is a very ironic, sarcastic commentary on global warming and the whole weather debate. It has it takes liberals and conservatives, and it is extreme critiques of both. It's very dark humor, but I like the film because it enters into the conversation how we should address this topic. And I think it's very David Sirota, of all people, because he's just like a labor guy. He's always concentrating on Amazon and all the, and then he was behind this project. I mean, he made some money for a change. Good for him.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Did you see it in the cinema or do you see it on Netflix?
I haven't been in the cinema since 2003. Okay. Hey, I watch film in my undershirt, my boxers with a cold beer. That's how I like to watch films. Okay.
Nice. Well, you're a real cool guy. Yeah. Well, so, anyway,
I'm a credit to late boomers.
Yeah. So Gary Proctor says at least the gas is cheaper in Russia. Here in the UK, we can't afford gas. No, I get that message. So that's that's absolutely
that's a
right.
choice, you guys. That's a choice by your leader. That's a choice.
That's exactly right. And it's just horrific that the people are being stuck with these enormous gas bills. It's just brutal.
Well, George, this isn't the one.
That's right. I mean,
the spot market.
Yep.
That's the best way to go.
Yes.
Okay, it's nonsense.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's right. It's that's what's so bizarre. That they keep blaming Russia, and yet they're unable to point out anything at all that Russia has neglected to do. I mean, Russia has fulfilled all of its contracts since they want to purchase it on the spot market. Well, the Russians are charging the market prices. I mean, the world market price. That's what you do. I mean, so now we're supposed to provide you with subsidized natural gas. Why should we do that? So yeah, I mean, that's it's really ridiculous. And of course, because the gas prices have soared in the way they have, Russia is making money. I mean, Russia's doing rather well through all of this. So the Germans who said, okay, well, we're going to delay Nord Stream 2 by certification. Russians haven't lost any money at all doing this because during this time gas prices have soared. So they've made up all the money that they've lost.
Well, and there's this ridiculous assumption. I don't know where it comes from, but everything to deal with Russia and the situation in Eastern Europe is all absurd. George and I have been chronicling it. I mean, George is right. Gazprom hasn't lost a nickel, not one wooden nickel on this. You know why? Because other people want the natural gas. There is a vast pipeline system in Russia. The Chinese will buy as much as the Russians will sell. The Japanese, the Koreans, and all through the Asian basin, they'll buy it. In Germany, that's your call. It's your craven call, okay? So, taking away Putin's pipeline, it's like saying, we're going to take one of your toothpicks away from you.
Right.
Fine.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think Biden himself, blurted this out at the news conference the other day when he was essentially admitting we don't have a united front in NATO on sanctions because Europe is dependent upon Russian natural gas, and that any attempt to put on these horrific sanctions that Russia has never seen before, well, that's going to affect Europe's energy supply. Is that, Europeans don't want to freeze this winter, and Germans definitely don't want that to happen. So, that's the situation. That's the situation they have brought themselves to. I mean, it's not it wasn't Putin who did any of this. They brought this on themselves.
Well, everyone, what is the great threat, Tony Blinken's biggest card to play, the SWIFT's payment system. Okay, well, let's calm down, because he likes to bluster. He's a terrible actor with a terrible script. He convinces no one of anything with his Hillary Clinton 1990s haircut, okay? And I'm sure the suit's $10,000, but it looks cheap to me. Okay, so let me put it to you this way, guys. They want to throw Russia out of the SWIFT system. Okay, so how is Russia going to sell its oil and gas to Europe? Are they just going to give it away?
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that's what the Germans told the Americans. And that's why that story appeared earlier this week, saying that the whole issue of kicking Russia out of SWIFT has now been put on the back burner. It's not being discussed anymore. So much for that. That was the big trump card. Oh, we're going to throw you out of the SWIFT system, and you've got a bit of dose of reality, which is no. I mean, we can't do it. So Biden and Blinken are back to square one, which is continuing to bluster. So there's a story today in Bloomberg, kind of a piece of fake news, in which apparently Xi Jinping got onto Putin and said, hey, can you not invade Ukraine during the Olympics? I mean, it's going to really put a dampener on the on the sport. total bogus fake news, obviously put about by U.S. intelligence services. No one else is reporting. It's not reported anywhere in any of the Russian media, not reported in any Chinese media, Chinese wire services. So completely just made out of whole cloth, but Bloomberg is running with it.
But George and I will demonstrate to you the absurdity of this story, because George and I have talked about how the Olympics may play into someone's timing. But let's go back and look at the recent political events during Olympics. Let's go to August 2008. It wasn't Russia that invaded Georgia. It was Georgia that invaded the separatist South Ossetia. Russia didn't start it. Okay, let's go to the Sochi Games in 2014. It was the West that overthrew the government in Kiev. It wasn't Russia that did it. So I would say to the meathead at Bloomberg, so is it going to be Ukraine again attacking the Donbass? Because that would be in line with other political events surrounding the Olympics. I don't know why these people get paid money to write such nonsense, or maybe that's why they're paid money.
Right. No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, look, Bloomberg is a pillar of the whole World Economic Forum, Wall Street establishment. I mean, that's why he created this media outlet. So not surprising that Bloomberg is just being used in order to launder CIA talking points. But you're absolutely right, because I do think that there is a danger of something happening during the Olympic Games, precisely for what you said. What happened in 2008? What happened in 2014? They're figuring Russia isn't going to be watching. Russia will be distracted, and they can make a quick move. But again, even then, the world isn't really watching. But it's clear that in the case of 2014, this was a big deal for Russia, and so Russia really wasn't watching it. I mean, they were just because they organized these games, and so they weren't really paying too much attention to Ukraine. 2008, well, I mean, that was a Summer Olympics. Summer Olympics always draw a lot more attention than the Winter Olympics. So I think, just because Putin's going to go there for the opening ceremony, I'm not sure how long he's going to stay there, but so I'm quite sure they're going to be watching what's going on in Ukraine. They're not going to be distracted. Oh, look, skiers, ice skating. I mean, it's just, no, I think they're watching Ukraine very closely.
That's the time that we should all be prepared for some kind of false flag, because you have to look at, Zelensky and his orbit didn't take well to Biden's gaffe, okay? Right. And so what they take away from that is indecision, lack of commitment. They saw how the Americans, quote unquote, backed up Georgia, okay? Right. And they feel like, of course they should feel like a deal is going to be made above them, because the U.S. doesn't see Ukraine of any strategic value other than creating headaches for Russia. So Zelensky may take the initiative like Saakashvili did.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. Saakashvili clearly felt that, if he can just deal with this problem with South Ossetia and Abkhazia, he'll be good to go for NATO membership. He said, hey, well, I now qualify for NATO membership. There are no conflicts on my soil. Made a drastic miscalculation because, again, probably he was urged by Bush and Condoleezza Rice hey, Russia's not going to do anything. I mean, it's like, Russia's much too weak, much too vulnerable. It's not going to start causing trouble. But yeah, I mean, it drastically miscalculated, as often happens when countries miscalculate as to what Russia is going to do. And yeah, but as you said, Zelensky is now got himself into a real hole here. So I do think that he isn't going to just let this go, and with the Americans saying, man, kind of minor incursion, we're not going to be too bothered about it. So he's got every incentive to make himself the center of attention.
Well, again, trying to dissect the words of someone that is mentally impaired, and I'm not trying to be cruel or anybody, but as George and I said in a previous podcast, the gaffe that Biden made, actually, he let the mask drop because this is what's being discussed in his National Security Council. So, taking a minor incursion. Well, let's try to figure out what that possibly might mean. Does that mean just assisting the Donbass?
Right.
Okay, which of course they say the Russians are already there. Okay,
right.
This is their claim.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, if something were to start and it would only limit the Donbass, is that what Biden, in one of the scenarios he was told, and he let it slip as he always does? Okay,
right.
And plus, then you look at Zelensky and his orbit and say, but you're not going to do anything beyond the Donbass. Well, we don't have the Donbass. Okay,
right.
I mean, that is going to create an enormous amount of anxiety, because I think that Zelensky is very much a novice, obviously a creature of others around him, and he may think for his own political survival, they got one shot at this. Okay, right. It's one shot, and if they blow it, he's gone. Okay, I mean, he's got lower public opinion polls than Kamala Harris.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, I think that they've talked about a possibility. Yeah, exactly. So Russia moving some forces or artillery across the border, and then they, maybe a minor incursion would be what they call a cyber attack, which they claim Russia is doing anyway, or they do this hybrid warfare, or they, or some kind of, disinformation. I mean, they've told him, there are all these different scenarios, and maybe Biden got very confused and said, well, if it's a minor incursion. The problem is that as far as the Germany and France are concerned, I mean, they're essentially saying you've got to just cool things down. You've got to tamp things down, because this is not going in a good direction, and we can't be on board with any kind of major sanctions. I mean, that's the message that they give the Americans. The problem is, and this is something we've talked about before, is that the Europeans have often been hesitant and have made these noises. Well, let's just get round the negotiating table, but have just been pushed aside by American relentlessness. I mean, remember, Germany and France actively, noisily opposed the 2003 invasion of Iraq. I mean, a lot of good that did. And then throughout the conflict in Yugoslavia, first in Bosnia and over Kosovo, again, Germany and France saying, no, we don't want to go down the path of bombing. This is not a good idea. Let's see if we can get some kind of a peace plan agreed to. And again, the Americans could just simply, their relentlessness and through their weight in NATO. I mean, they run the show. They can get their own way. So, again, I don't think the Americans will be put off by Olaf Scholz's skepticism.
Well, I mean, the number of things, again, what is it we heard? There's 14 or 18 scenarios, something like that. That could be just it could be complete fake news for all we know. Yeah. But the Europeans, particularly the Germans, and I would somewhat believe that the French are saying, okay, you want, the UK flies military hardware avoiding German airspace. Already, not everybody's on board here. Right. But the obvious question to ask, and I'm not a military man, so you want to reinforce Ukrainian forces, you want to, beef them up and all that for for purposes of deterrence. But I mean, if you're on the other side of the line, that looks like escalation.
Yeah,
okay?
no, that's exactly.
And that is begging a response. So, I mean, it ends up being a spiral downward. Okay? It's always this kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's why these idiots, these absolute fools in the United States and the UK who say, oh, we're only sending defensive weapons. Oh, it's defensive, lethal aid. Well, you send this stuff in to someone else, to the Russians. They say, yeah, I mean, weapons can be used defensively. Well, they can be used offensively. And in any case, even if these are defensive, it only means that it frees you up to take offensive action because your defense is covered. So, I mean, weapons are weapons. Weapons of war are weapons of war, and you use them in war. So the notion that you can do this, and then the Russians are just going to sit there, on their hands, just watching this as if, well, this is really interesting. I mean, it's something that is guaranteed to trigger the military intervention.
See, the way Blinken and others want to characterize this is they're protecting Ukraine, an ally. They're not a member of NATO, but they're an ally. Okay, but at the end of the day, that's a difference without a distinction, because what Russia sees, Russia doesn't per se see Ukraine building up its forces. What does Russia see? It sees NATO building up its forces. And this is why we had a conversation of the deaf and dumb, okay? Because Blinken won't recognize that, okay? Right. He won't. Right. Okay, it's all about Ukraine. And the Russians are saying, no, we sent you 2 documents, one to NATO, one to the United States, about pan-European security and the necessity of NATO to stop its eastern expansion to Russia's borders. It's as simple as that. But you never hear it from Bloomberg or anybody else.
That's very true. So we have a super chat here from Al QK, and he says, anything significant about a Ukrainian organization called the Anti-Corruption Action Center and its co-founder, Vitaly Shabunin. He was recently in a panel discussion hosted by the Atlantic Center, maybe Atlantic Council, I don't know, Atlantic Center's Eurasia Center. Have you heard of this Vitaly Shabunin?
No, that doesn't well with me.
Yeah, I mean, the Anti-Corruption Action Center, I mean, there was that number of these organizations that the United States supported, and I guess still supports, ostensibly because they're fighting corruption in Ukraine. But of course, they're a complete fraud because they're about eliminating economic rivals to U.S. companies. I mean, there was never anything about any corruption in there. So it was just simply, well, we don't like them, and so we get rid of this economic rival. Oh, it's because it's corrupt. So I mean, this was, that's what Masha, was doing. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, they're not against oligarchy; they're just against certain oligarchs.
Right, that's it. It was always bogus. But again, because you use this nice word like anti-corruption, you say, oh, that's good. Well, we're fighting against corruption, and media still report, Biden was very concerned about corruption in Ukraine. He was fighting corruption.
That's why he had Hunter there. That's why Hunter was there.
Exactly. That's why Hunter, got this $1 million a year gig without having ever to show up. At no point did he once show up in Ukraine during this time. I mean, it was an amazing gig, no knowledge of energy, no knowledge of, gas or anything. It's $1 million a year.
As they like to say, I love this phrase, it's great work if you can get it.
Yeah. Biden was fighting a corruption, and Masha was fighting corruption. That's nonsense. And that was the amazing thing. I mean, when she was testifying during the impeachment thing, well, what companies did you target we thought were really corrupt? Well, let me think about that, but I thought you said you were fighting this corruption. You can't even remember a single company that you were targeting. So
but her feelings were hurt.
Her feelings are hurt because apparently being an ambassador is a job for life. I mean, it's just you You get this.
Well, George and I don't have the evidence, but considering her behavior and her reaction, is it, in my opinion, she was watching out for the interests of the Joe Biden family. Okay,
Exactly.
that's what her job was. Okay,
Exactly. And that was her gig, and basically they told her, don't get yourself involved in Burisma. So when you have anyone talks about Burisma, just stay numb. You don't know anything about that.
It is not relevant that Burisma is one of the most corrupt energy companies in the world. Okay. Just I want to put that out.
Yeah. It's just an amazing thing. I mean, like you speak of Burisma, that the media still reported, well, there's no evidence that Biden did anything wrong. So you mean he held up U.S. aid, a substantial amount of U.S. aid, unless Poroshenko fired the prosecutor investigating the company on which his son had this no-show job, and then afterwards, lo and behold, after this prosecutor was fired, the Burisma was settled. In other words, that the investigation was closed and the whole matter was settled. No evidence of any wrongdoing here.
When does a vice president of the United States determine who's the general prosecutor of another country? I've just never heard that, George.
I've never heard it either. Exactly. There's about, he was fighting against corruption. Oh, isn't that?
Well, I mean, I think it tells you everything. After the overthrow of the democratic elected government of Yanukovych, guess who was one of the first to fly in? Good old Joe, because it was his portfolio.
That's it. Yes.
I know that he took his son to China. I don't know if Hunter ever made it to Ukraine. I suppose he was.
I don't think he ever.
No, I think he was in a cheap hotel with cheap prostitutes at that time. That was one of his career moments. Okay,
right.
But, I mean, just read the book, the Laptop from Hell, in his own words. Okay, I'm not making this stuff up. Okay.
Yeah.
He had an interesting trick he played with M&Ms, which I won't go into detail about. Okay, but so Biden flies in, and the iconic picture. Remember, George? I guess where the cabinet of ministers would have their room, and who sat at the head of the table? Oh, Viceroy Joe.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. He was at the head of the table. Poroshenko was not at the head of the table. He sat at the head of the table. It's just kind of extraordinary that that Biden has sort of got away with that, and we're still supposed to believe this nonsense of plucky little Ukraine standing up to big bully Russia, and then you say, well, here was this sleaze, this corruption that was going on, everything post 2014. Now you have the two leading opposition political figures, leaders of the two biggest parties, are facing treason charges. This plucky little democracy that we're supposed to go out and go fight for. Amazing. I mean, but the abysmal nature of the Western media coverage it's just an embarrassment, because they just trot out this idea, Hungary 56, Czechoslovakia 68. I mean, none of it has anything to do with any of that. But given how ignorant the public is, given how the media and the Democrats are lockstep behind Biden, given how stupid the Republicans are, this is a wonderful opportunity for them to carve out a popular position, and how they've just simply walked into this trap. It's not surprising. You could just get away with these nonsensical stories.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to it real quickly, the democratic government of Ukraine is Strana.ru, UA, the biggest news outlet in Ukraine, and it was in Russian, shut down, and the U.S. State Department and Michael McFaul applauded it as being courageous. Okay, right. After the coup, two of the biggest, I think they were the two biggest parties in Ukraine, the Party of Regions and the Communist Party. They were banned. Okay? So all of a sudden, your political spectrum is confined. Oh, look how these Democratic parties, as if the Communist Party wasn't democratic. It was very popular. It won elections. Okay, the Party of Regions won elections. Okay, Yanukovych was head of the party. Of the Party of Regions. I mean, what you do is, and then, you know, what Blinken did, which was so disgusting in Geneva. Well, if you look at public opinion polls in Ukraine after 2014, popularity for NATO has gone up. Popularity, what was the other one? More anxiety towards Russia has gone up. Well, Tony Blinken, are you just a syphilitic idiot? Okay, because you're not counting the population of the Donbass and Crimea.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So simple.
That's right. And of course, you know, even if you don't count them, and then you say, well, 55% support NATO. You know, leave aside whether the credibility of the polls, that still isn't very impressive. I mean, if you've locked off, you've lost the Southeast, you got 55% of the remainder, and these are the people who you claim are going to be fighting to the death. You know, they're going to fight to the bitter end against the Russians. No, it's not going to happen.
Well, also, and this is what's not talked about in Western media, and the Ukrainian government is too embarrassed to talk about it. But when there was a reaction against the terrorizing attacks on the Donbass in 2014, there was a military reaction. Yes, Russia did give aid and comfort to the people of the Donbass, and it was an overwhelming defeat for the Ukrainian military. George, I don't care how much junk you bring in from the West. At the end of the day, it's the human factor, okay? And I don't think they have, of course, they're fanatics. The Galicians, you know, they're fanatics. These neo-Nazis, they're fanatics, okay? But they're just fanatics in and of themselves, okay?
Yes.
And the rest, I don't see, from what I've been told, morale is very, very poor.
Yes.
The desire to fight in the middle of winter, I don't see it. I don't see it.
No, that's right. Remember, I mean, they were defeated pretty quickly and pretty decisively. I mean, so this was when Brit Hume said, "Well, the Ukrainians are going to fight." You know, this is some as if this is the partisans in World War II. They're going to be fighting to the bitter end. Where's the evidence for that? I mean, it's just, again, people are just sort of making this stuff up. Because that's kind of what they want to think. But, you know, you have these idiots like Joe Scarborough going on and on about what the hell is Biden doing? We got to go in there and, and into Ukraine, stand with Ukraine. And, and then the Republicans, they're going along with this nonsense. And it is so absolutely phony. I mean, perfectly well, you are not going to go and fight there. I mean, it is an absolutely ridiculous proposition because there's no symmetry there. This is an existential matter for Russia. It's peripheral to U.S. interests. So there's no symmetry. I mean, so the idea, well, we got to go in there, fight for whatever the hell it is, wherever the hell it is, against the people for whom this is an existential matter. It's just dumb beyond belief.
We gotta fight whoever they are over there before.
Yeah, whoever they are. I don't know where the hell it is on the map. I mean, it's like, I am sure you go to Joe Scarborough and you show him a map of Europe and Russia, and you say, okay, now pick the country that is Ukraine. You got all of these countries, and so now pick the one that is Ukraine. I am sure, 100% sure, Joe Scarborough will get that wrong.
I'm pretty sure he knows where that intern, what corner of his office. The geography is very intimate and close to him, if you know what I mean. I'm not casting aspersions here.
Definitely no.
Okay. All righty. The one thing with the Republicans, and I want to echo what George is saying here, and just add an extra layer. This is all the elites talking to each other. The same people that went into Iraq. Let's bomb Syria. Let's bomb Syria. Serbia. It's the same crowd. It's the same crowd. Okay. And and George and I commented on the dismal 1 hour and 50 something odd minutes that Joe tried to show he had. He showed his ability to screw things up. Okay, he's redefined that for himself. But I mean, it's an elite conversation. It's elite conversation. It has nothing to do with the average person here. You're not talking about inflation, supply chains, crime, immigration. No, everybody in the media wants Ukraine, Russia, blah, blah. You know, this is elite talk. Okay, and if you want to say, it's partisan. No, it's intensely bipartisan. Okay, because there are plenty of people that feel butt sore, George, over Afghanistan. They took that grift away from us. You got to find new grifting grounds. Ukraine is perfect for it because it is the definition of corruption.
Yes, that's right. It's very, very interesting because, of course, every time, as you say, these people who are pushing for American military intervention, they're always having difficulties justifying it. So again, you mentioned about Yugoslavia. I mean, you had in the 1990s, the drumbeat, got to bomb the Serbs, got to bomb the Serbs, bomb the Serbs, and then somebody would say, why? I mean, but you have the sort of the kind of realist position, say, who'd say, okay, I don't like the Serbs, I hate the Serbs, they're monsters, they're beasts, but why is it our affair? I mean, because that was the only argument that was permissible. You couldn't say, hey, basically you destroyed Yugoslavia. The only argument that was still got public airing is, I hate the Serbs, but I don't see why we should go to war against them. But I had difficulties, and so you'd have these U.S. policymakers who'd go on the Hill, and they would be asked this question: why do we need to go against the Serbs? Well, because there'll be a terrible migration flow. The migrants are going to flow all over Europe.
You'll create it.
Exactly. It's like, I mean, that was the sort of the logical question. Okay, wouldn't bombing actually trigger a migrant flow? No. Bombing.
People love to stay in bombed houses. People stay in bombed houses all over the world.
All over the world, exactly.
Very trendy. Great. Very trendy.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. And then there's but it might affect stability, because lots of countries might get involved. Greece will get involved, and that means Turkey will get involved. Turkey gets involved, Iran gets involved, Pakistan gets involved, and then everybody's involved. So, you got this loony kind of domino theory.
Best thing, don't do anything.
Exactly. It might upset the trade routes. I remember Clinton at one point came up, the trade routes. The trade route. No one knows what the hell a trade route is. It's going to interfere with the trade route. We need to get involved. And of course, that was, so no one could come up with any sort of a rationale. And then, of course, 2 years later, it was time to gin up support for the Iraq intervention. And then you had to come up with the whole weapons of mass destruction, 45 minutes before blast off, and so on. All lies, but the lies had to serve a particular purpose, which is nobody understood why exactly are we going to war. I mean, what's the rationale for it? So you have to sort of give these terrifying scenarios. We don't do it now. 45 minutes and the whole world goes up.
I can remember, I don't know if it was a few weeks or a few months after the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq. But they started asking the question, so where are the weapons of mass destruction? And I think it was Bloomberg again saying, they were smuggled to Russia. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that theory about the smuggling, that was peddled for a long time. And I'm sure that if you ask a number of those interventionists today, what do you think happened to those weapons of mass destruction? They will say, I think they were smuggled either into Russia or into Iran. That was another alternative, which is that they were smuggled into Iran. Quite again, why Iran would particularly want to help out Saddam Hussein, that was never really explained. But yeah, you had to come up with this theory. Why did we get it all wrong? Well, hey,
but it's the common sense and logic never applied, did it, George? Because let's think about it, everybody. Let's think calmly here. So would a country invade a country if it really did have weapons of mass destruction?
Exactly.
Because if they did, they might use them. Exactly. And you know what it does? It creates chaos, even for the people that use them. And no weapons of mass destruction were ever used. They were never found. Okay, that is. I remember asking that question. I said, "Well, would you really want to invade a country that has chemical weapons? Really?" Okay.
Of course. Now that is the most obvious and most logical question, which is, hey, you wouldn't have done it if you thought that they had nuclear weapons. And just like why you don't invade North Korea? Yeah, because you kind of think, yeah, they have it, so we're not invading North Korea. It's the most obvious point, but it's always lost in the shuffle. Just like, when do we invade Libya? When we know that Gaddafi, idiot that he got rid of his weapons of mass destruction.
I remember Jen Psaki when she was at the State Department under Obama. I think it was Jen Psaki, or was the Hoofer, whatever her name was, I don't remember. But I remember, what was it? The United Press guy, AP guy, Lee. He said, he was talking about North Korea's nuclear weapons program, and she said, "Well, we don't recognize that North Korea." As if that makes any difference. We don't recognize it, okay? This is the type of people we're dealing with here, okay? But we don't recognize that they have nuclear weapons, okay? Well, okay, well, maybe does Israel have nuclear weapons? Oh, no, we don't comment on that. I mean, it's so easy to make these people tie themselves into pretzels, okay? And the elite media protects them, always.
That's right, that's it, yeah, that's right. But it's an interesting issue, because of course, when they had this thing with North Korea, they basically they had to accept that you can bluster and holler and impose sanctions, which incidentally, again, Russia and China went along with those sanctions. To
a certain point, yes.
Yeah, that's right. But they went and they went along with the sanctions against Iran. So Russia and China have been cooperative with the West. I mean, there lots of people who have criticized Russia for doing this, but nonetheless, they have gone along with it. But the one thing you don't do, you don't go to war with North Korea, because you know that they mean business. There's not. I know. Can anyone doubt today, with all this protestations about NATO's defensive, NATO's it doesn't have any aggression? Does anyone doubt that if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, NATO would not long ago have invaded Russia? I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, it's even stupid to say that. It's the only reason why NATO has not invaded Russia and bombed Russia, because the nuclear weapons. So all of that just pay to all the nonsense of we're defensive, and no aggressing here.
I had this horrific vision today when I was walking from the underground metro. As I started out, it's blizzardy here. It's a lot of snow. It's really white. And I was thinking about, Stoltenberg, as we do. And I was just thinking, how NATO treats its periphery. And, I have this really horrific vision that Stoltenberg was a female ice skater. And he was in one of those little tutus, and he's ice skating on the borders of Ukraine right now. And he's showing everyone, we're just a defensive alliance, we're just in a little tutu on ice skates, and we're just going around. I mean, this, good feel. Whenever has a military alliance wanted you to feel good about it, George?
That's it.
I mean, it's so bizarre, isn't it?
That's it. That's right. And that's the amazing thing, that they have this massive propaganda blizzard. It's constant. It's an ongoing thing. We are defensive. We're sending exclusively defensive weapons. We mean no harm to Russia. It's only Russia is aggressive, and we absolutely love, adore the Russian people. They're our favorites. I mean, we just don't like the Kremlin, but we just love Russia and Russian culture. Whoa, we love it. Incidentally, Hermann Goering said that at one point in the Nuremberg tribunal is saying, you know, look, we never wanted war with Russia. We love Russia. You know, Russian culture. You know, Germans have always loved Russian culture. You know, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky. We've always loved all of that. So you know, these NATO characters talk in this sort of really nonsensical way, including this week when these British defense ministers. Well, yeah, the British defense minister, then of course you have the UK foreign secretary. Both have suddenly become experts on Russian history and Russian culture. So, and they're now pontificating about it. So, also, we just love Russian culture.
Oh, I just can't wait for, you know, Monday's Hannity when they have Trump's daughter-in-law come on, and you know she's going to talk about Ukraine. Okay, I mean everybody on cable is an expert on Russia, except for none of them are. Douglas McGregor is one. I like it when what's her name? Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
I mean, I don't think she's an expert on Ukraine, but she understands geopolitics. It's always very refreshing. I'm kind of interested in her gig though at Fox, maybe in another video.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, Scarborough and all. Oh, and then Brzezinski. Well, I mean, her father taught her everything she needs to know. Oh, did you know that his Brzezinski's son Mark is now U.S. ambassador to Poland?
I didn't know that. It doesn't surprise me. But
well, he wasn't up in Sweden for some reason, and they send him into Poland. Okay.
Is he a career diplomat or is he?
I met him in the 1980s in Poland. Okay, he was an exchange student. Okay,
right.
He enjoyed himself. Let me put it that way. Okay,
right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, I have to say though that Brzezinski was a very, very clever guy. I mean, you know, he used his cleverness for malign ends. Mika,
he was wrong about everything. He was wrong about everything.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, he was wrong, but you know, his agenda, that agenda that he spelled out in the grand chessboard. Yeah, I mean you know, NATO has pursued that agenda, and he wrote that in 1997, and NATO has pursued it. I mean, that was it. You know, his agenda was always, he had that Polish hatred for Russia, and he gave the blueprint. It was a blueprint for NATO, because he was then in the 90s when the Clinton administration made their decision to expand NATO. I mean, that's it. I mean, it was Yeltsin was unable to resist. He was so dependent on the Americans because he embarked on this stupid course that he embarked on. He broke from the rest of the Soviet Union. Now he needed the Americans to bail him out, so he wasn't in any kind of position to resist.
Yep, and now we're living with the consequences of that. I mean, it's something that George is, you were on Crosstalk, you're going to be on tomorrow. And, you know, some of the guests that we have had, and I do it respectfully, but I do kind of push back, is that, you know, when Blinken and Biden and all the rest of them say we need to sit down and talk, and my attitude is, you guys have been talking for 30 years and expanding. Okay, right. There's some kind of correlation here. The more you talk, the more you expand.
That's right. That's it. Exactly. We can just keep talking until the cows come home. The interesting aspect of it was also, which is something Russians bring up, but no one in the West does, which is an interesting argument. Russia signed off on the unification of Germany. Russia didn't have to do that. I mean, because yes, the Germans all wanted unification, fine, but Russians could have said, so what? You know, there's a 4-power agreement. We don't give a, about what the Germans want. There's a 4-power agreement about German unification. And if we're against it, then we're against it. We're just not going to sign off on it. And if you remember at the time, neither the British nor the French were exactly enthusiastic about German unification.
Maggie Thatcher wasn't.
Definitely wasn't. And Mitterrand wasn't exactly overjoyed at the prospect. The only people who were pushing for German reunification, apart from the Germans, were the Americans. So if Gorbachev had said, I'm just not signing off on it. I mean, I don't care that the Germans want unification. The 4-power agreement stays in place. but in fact, Gorbachev signed off on it, and basically got nothing at all for doing it. I mean, I don't know what he thought he was going to do, because then the next step was, of course, the rest of Eastern Europe falling.
But what happened was, I've met Gorbachev a number of times. He fell for it, George. He fell for it. You're a member of our private club.
Right.
He bought into it. Hubris. Okay.
Right.
Legacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
pretty sour,
Yeah. Yeah.
at least in the country I live. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I always find it really interesting when when you look at history, Peter, how do you deem Yeltsin and how do you deem Gorbachev? I'd say both of them are losers. Okay, I don't differentiate between. Right. I don't. Why would I?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, there really isn't. There really isn't. I mean, I think Gorbachev was just he was a bungler. Amazing in naivete. Yeltsin, I think, was more malevolent. I mean, Yeltsin actually set out to destroy what there was, the Soviet Union, without really ever thinking anything through, other than that the Americans are just going to keep bankrolling him. I mean, I don't know, Gorbachev maybe thought he could get some sort of a social democratic federation out of this, and then he'd have good relations with the West. I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but Yeltsin, I think, was just determined. I mean, I think he was a kind of rather malevolent figure. I mean, he embarked on such a destructive course, it was just a real catastrophe.
Again, it's a distinction without a difference. I mean, I'm sorry to offend anybody out there, but I like successful leaders. Gorbachev is a loser. Okay, right. He was a good Communist Party apparatchik. Yeah. Nothing more.
Yeah.
Nothing more. Not a visionary, not a thinker, knew nothing about economics, nothing. Okay, yeah. That's why he ended up where he is. Okay, I don't know if he lives here or in the U.S. I don't know. And Yeltsin, well, yeah, he took a hammer to the Soviet Union without any thought about what the consequences would be. And again, trusting these people in Washington, that famous clip, where Clinton is standing right behind him, and Yeltsin says something. We don't know if I don't remember if he's intoxicated or not. And, he starts laughing, and Clinton just, gives him a belly laugh, it's just like, wow, we really look at this. Okay. Right, look what we've reduced this country to. Okay. Yes. They weren't, he was laughing at him. They weren't laughing together.
Of course. That's right. That's that. Yeah, exactly. And I remember when Yeltsin came and he addressed the joint sessions of Congress, and all these idiots were kind of jumping up and down, like they do whenever Netanyahu comes and gives one of these joint addresses the joint session of Congress. Because what was he saying? He was saying, I'm going to basically dissolve everything was in the Soviet Union, everything was in Russia, and I'm going to turn it all over to you. You can run the whole show just as long as you line my pocket. Yeah, of course they were jumping up and down. Great, we've got this wonderful prize. All of those natural resources, everything is going to be ours. Of course they loved Yeltsin. So it was extraordinary. That if you read that when they signed that NATO-Russia foundation document. It was in 1997, and there's Yeltsin. This was in Paris, and Yeltsin was kind of saying, "Well, it's very, very hard for us to do this. A lot of mistrust towards NATO. We're not very happy about NATO expansion, but." We're going in there with good feelings, and they yelled, and of course Bill Clinton, attaboy, and
Chirac. Attaboy.
Yeah, I think it was already Chirac. Yeah, that's it. Go on, attaboy. That's it. We're good. It's all based on trust. What a bloody fool.
Well, then on New Year's Eve, 1999, Yeltsin, with whatever horse sense he had, and he had some, he passed the baton to a very, very young and looked to be very inexperienced, a lot more, he was probably more experienced than we thought at the time. I remembered I was here. And he had a honeymoon with the West until the Yukos affair. And everything was good. Look at the Financial Times. He's a reformer. He's a younger generation, blah, 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 all this here. And then when Khodorkovsky was selling it off, Putin said, that oil belongs to Russia. It's not your oil, okay? It is the natural resource endowed by God on this land. And we, the people, will determine what is done with it. And ever since that day, it's only been downhill. Tyrant, dictator, all of this. And it was because you said, no, this is our natural resources, and we're being conned by these people. And it was all true.
Yes, that's right. I have to say, I didn't really think that, because I thought that when he came to power, I did think that a major change in Russian policy would take place, because I thought then that this was a direct consequence of the Yugoslavia debacle, that basically the military, the military and the intelligence suddenly realized we are really weak. We have been humiliated, and this can't go on. And so they removed Yeltsin. And I felt then they wouldn't have put in this guy, this apparently very young guy, unless they were very confident that he would deliver. So I was expecting big changes from him right away.
And that you have the vantage point over all of the rest of us, as you were laser focused on the breakup of Yugoslavia, and that's why you drew that conclusion. And you drew the right conclusion also. I mean, the perception was, I remember very clearly, and you have to remember that we're always making a juxtaposition from Yeltsin, his disposition, his obvious weakness, the general social sense of huge humiliation, okay? And here's a younger guy, compared to today, a lot more, what we'd say, a more liberal-minded. I mean, Yeltsin wasn't liberal. He was focused on destroying a legacy of the Soviet Union. So, I mean, in the West, they saw that as a liberal thing, but when I'm living here, it wasn't liberal in that sense, okay?
No, not at all. No.
And then, I mean, between Putin coming to power and the Yukos, it's very, very short, George.
It's very, very, very short, very, very, very short. And it was clear then that major changes were taking place, because even then, when it was in 2007, when he delivers his Munich conference speech, again, fairly not that many years had passed, and it was clear that this is a big geopolitical shift that's taking place, and yeah, I mean, this was because I think when he made that Munich conference speech, then the lines were drawn. He now became a truly a hated person.
Let me tell you a story about that. A friend of mine that is in the know at the time saw the original draft. And apparently members of Putin's Security Council were asked, what do you think about it? And it was watered down a little bit because it would be like a strike of lightning, a lightning bolt coming out. I remember Robert Gates, he was in the audience. I remember this so well. I was sitting in the studio in RT, in the news studio, commenting on it as a live event. And I remember Robert Gates doing this. No. You could see he was totally distraught. Okay. Right. And Putin was just completely undeterred. I mean, he went for, what was it? What was the phrase he says? When the wolf gets hungry, its appetite grows. Okay. I mean, he was using really strong metaphors here.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. When did he give the famous one? I think it was in 2005 when he made that speech about that the fall of the Soviet Union was a geopolitical catastrophe.
The greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century.
Exactly. That also just caught a lot of attention.
But everyone, when you hear that, take a step back and find the speech yourself.
It's on the Kremlin site, yeah.
Read it and you'll draw the conclusion as I did, because it's in black and white, is that it was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe for the Russian people.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, because why did he say that? And it's something that we live today. We've been talking about Eastern Europe and Ukraine. There are Russians on the other side of the border.
Right.
Okay,
right.
And it's because of the Russian Empire, the way Stalin redrew maps, okay,
yep.
and Khrushchev, giving stuff away,
right.
And that is the legacy. Tens of millions of Russians were found on the other side of the border, and on those other side of the borders, they weren't always and actually often not treated very well.
to say the least. Yeah, exactly right. But he also said that it's the 1917. He said there were two geopolitical catastrophes for the Russian people. 1917 was also a geopolitical catastrophe for the Russian people. So, he kind of bookended it. It was like you bookended in the 20th century. You had 1917 and then 1991. And you can say, which I think something like Zhirinovsky says, in both cases, this was done by the communists. I mean, the communists did this. I mean, what they did to the Russian people, first with this horror show of imposing his Bolshevism on them, and then just tossing it all away, just like that. You just tossed it all away.
And it's something that, George and I we discussed privately about doing, what's it called? Red nostalgia, okay? And, there's it's implied that people miss the communist system. No, they don't. Okay, what they did miss is some of the stability. Okay, right. All of the freebies, everything like that. Okay, right. But I've never met one person that misses the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. I've never met. I know people that are a member of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, which is much more of a liberal democratic party with Russian features. Right. Anything compared to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. When the Communist Party of the Soviet Union came to an end, there wasn't too many tears. Okay,
that's right.
Career apparatchik.
That's exactly right. I think people make a distinction between the communist system and some of the accomplishments of the Soviet system. The space program, the education system. No one doubts that they had a very good education system, and of course, the extraordinary victory in World War II, which again, they did it. They led the country into that to a great victory. And I think, and the same goes to Stalin. I mean, people aren't nostalgic. Oh, we want Stalin back. But they do acknowledge his accomplishments. I mean, yeah, it was horrific. All the other consequences of like the collectivization and so on. But the crash industrialization and the ruthlessness with which he pursued that war, you have to say it was a great accomplishment on his part. Somebody else, some other leader would quite likely have failed. Would have collapsed. It required someone with almost his inhuman ruthlessness to pull that off.
Well, it's kind of it's a Gaggle rule. He was there at the time. He was on the top of the heap. You got to give credit where credit is due, and horrendous costs, absolutely. Okay, but when I know in the 20 years I've lived here, I've obviously been in contact with a lot of veterans, and they never think about Stalin. They don't have a beloved feeling about Stalin, but it was during Stalin's time when we won the Great War. Okay, so I mean, these again, I got Bloomberg on my mind. The re-Sovietization of Russia, remilitarization of it. It's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense.
Yes, yeah, it really is. Because they don't understand the point that they have a complex view of their recent path. Putin doesn't like the Bolsheviks. I mean, it's clear he doesn't like them. I mean, he talks about the 1917 a geopolitical catastrophe. He also says pointedly that Lenin and the Bolsheviks were responsible for Russia's defeat in World War I. Russians don't run away. They don't run away. That's not in the Russian mentality, but they did under the influence of the Bolsheviks in World War I. But you have to give credit where credit's due. I mean, they withstood that extraordinary, horrific onslaught from Hitler's armies. No one else was able to do it. It was invincible. No one could defeat them until the Russians did.
We've had in the last 20 years that was, being a keen student of Russian history, is that the rehabilitation and recognition of many of the white generals during the Civil War, which was unthinkable during the Soviet era. Okay, and what the historiography now is, and it's something that George and I have talked about before, is that it was a difficult history. It was a very painful history, but you don't wipe it away. You have to integrate it and learn from it. In the U.S., they recently took down the statue of Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, which put it in. What really irritates me, George? They're really angry with Teddy Roosevelt because they don't know the context of the history at all. Okay. That he's just a white guy. Well, a good part of American history is about a lot of white people. Okay, they were there, and European. Someone once said to me, why do you study European history? There's so many white people there. I said, because Europeans are white.
No, that's right. This is a guy who created the wildlife preserves in the United States. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. It's forgotten that he actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating the end of the Russo-Japanese War. This is a man of enormous accomplishments. And the idea of taking down his statue is just, it's just utter barbarism. It's like, I don't really care about history. It's just a white guy. Just get rid of him. And I think that's sadly where America is going. And then you have to say, how you're going to be this big global superpower, building coalitions or whatever that you need to be number one in the world. You're destroying your own history. That just doesn't happen that way.
No, it doesn't. And what it does is that, what was it? It was Benedict Anderson that wrote, what was it? Imagine
Communities, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really, really interesting book. And a great deal of our history is lore. It's how we define ourselves. Okay, a lot of things that we think about ourselves is an integration of so many different elements. Okay, and every single a vibrant society, a society that is self-aware, needs these things. Okay, and that's why Benedict Anderson, the historian, called it "Imagine Communities," and he's not saying that in a derogatory way. Okay, even the process of imagining, it's aspirational as well. Okay, and our off and on a good friend and bad friend Macron in France, he is clued into this. He's understood this.
Right, but that's a very interesting raises an interesting point, because the way a nation can continue is if it has a shared vision of itself and its history. What's happened in the United States is that there isn't that shared vision. You've got the very influential, liberal, left, whatever, propagated by the media, the academy, Silicon Valley, and so on, which just sees America, that's just a white country, bad white people, all over the place, needs to be taken over by good white people like us. And then we have our, our colored people, minions, who do our bidding and grateful to us all the time. That vision of history. And then, you've got the vision of history that articulated by Trump in his July the 4th, 2020 speech, which talks about, we conquered a continent, we won world wars, industrialized, became the biggest industrial power in the world. All of our company, we sent a man to the moon, and so on. But if there's no common ground here, then America kind of ceases to be a country. You have to have a shared vision of that history,
even if it's a painful history. Everybody,
yeah.
Okay. I don't remember what year it was, George. When did Trump give his speech in Warsaw?
Well, that was I think quite early. I think maybe either 2017.
Well, it was about a defense of Western civilization, and I remember, he's a nationalist. He's, always, no, he was talking about civilization, not about nations.
Right.
Okay. I mean, again, these people are paid so much money. It's like, let's go Brandon. That NBC reporter, she really thought she heard, let's go Brandon. That's how their brains are wired.
No, exactly. And that's it. I mean, he was talking about civilization. It was an important speech. Just as I thought his July the 4th speech was an important speech. But if you're, I mean, I don't know. Do you remember there was an episode in our favorite show, The Sopranos, where the domestic to The Sopranos, she was having a picnic with her boyfriend, and they were both getting ready for their citizenship exam. And he was kind of fed up with this, and she was asking him a question: who wrote the Star Spangled Banner? Martin Luther King. No. And it says, like, who delivered the Gettysburg Address? Martin Luther King. Every time she got asked this question, Martin Luther King. But in a way, it is. I mean, history has sort of been reduced now. Oh well, it's white racism, and that's it. There's nothing else to discuss about American history, just white racism. So it was just a very funny thing. It's like, well, that's the only thing you have to know.
It's one of these interesting trends. George and I like to talk about films. Oliver Stone, I can remember when he came out with JFK, and I lost a girlfriend because of that, because she hated politics and the film was so long.
Right. Yeah.
She wanted to meet somebody else that would have much more fun. And then when I think of this Godfather of Harlem and what they have in common, I enjoyed both, don't get me wrong, but I find this is kind of a disturbing trend because on the one hand, you want people to be aware of certain historical events and individuals, but to do that, you have to popularize it, and you have to take a lot of shortcuts. And so, and then, then it goes to an extreme. A few years ago, one of my historical figure that I just absolutely revere is Abraham Lincoln. I just think just a genius of a person. And a few years ago, they had a film about, he was actually a vampire hunter, which was really disappointing because, if that's the only thing someone sees about Abraham Lincoln, oh yeah, he killed vampires. Mm-hmm. Right. That's really sad.
Right, really sad. Right, yeah. I remember there was one of those comedies, it was, I think in the 80s, a kind of spoof of Hollywood, and with Kevin Bacon, and they were trying to get him to, invest in some money. And the studio head said, well, how about this film? It's called Abe and the Babe. It's a film about Abe Lincoln and Babe Ruth. And, they meet and they have a good time, Abe and the Babe. That's the sort of mentality. Well, let's just put together people that we, like or don't like, and then we'll just, shove in, they'll just play baseball or, whatever it is. So,
and they'll fight over a girl.
Exactly. That's nice. That's a nice and utterly moronic. I mean, there was some Hollywood thing with Walter Matthau played Einstein, and Einstein was, acting as Cupid for some young couple. Isn't that nice? We don't have to think it all about Einstein, his ideas, his theories, or anything else. We'll have him as a kind of benevolent old man acting as Cupid.
Yeah, but see, a thing that I noticed when I was teaching at the University of California is that it's almost kind of cool to be stupid. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I don't know that. Okay, I'm not really good in history. I mean, Jesse Waters, which he's really, gone great heights now at Fox. I mean, he started out on the street with a microphone, and who fought the United States during the Second World War? France, Mexico. I mean, and then they just say, oh well, I don't know. I mean, when I was coming up, that you'd be embarrassed. I mean, don't you know the basics? Okay, right. And my father's generation, there's the generation that fought in the Second World War, and you got to know that kind of stuff, okay? If you're going to be around the adults, okay? Because they venerated their history, a history that I to this day don't always agree with, okay? But it was a foundation. It was a foundation. And you need, as you said earlier, we need this common foundation. even if it's troubled, if it's a troubled history. I mean, look at what the Germans have to deal with, okay?
Right, that's exactly right. And it was right, speaking of, and then circling back to how we started, because, Annalena Baerbock, who,
your favorite girlfriend,
my favorite girl, she came to Moscow this week, and of course, we talked about this article in Politico, which contrasted her. She's young and pretty, with this old gray man, the eminence grise, as Politico put it, with Lavrov. And they had great hopes. The media had great hopes for her. She's a green, she's a new generation. And she disappointed them, because she went there and said what previous German leaders had said. Well, we have a special responsibility to maintain good relations with Russia. And I went and laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And we have to think about, what, the Nazi dictatorship did to Russia. They didn't want her, they do not want her to go down that path, because, that sort of thing, that's music to the ears of the Russians. But even she, she obviously had, came from, the Greens and all that different tradition. She was told that's the tone you have to adopt. You can't start, lecturing the Russians about Ukraine or whatever. And she realized that this is the tone she had to adopt. And you could see Lavrov gave her a smile of approval. So totally opposite to that article on Politico we were talking about. He actually gave her a smile of approval.
If you ever visit Moscow, there's 4 major airports now. When I first moved here, there was one. It was called Sheremetyevo. Sheremetyevo is still there. It's one of the most modern airports in the world. But when I moved here, it was one of the biggest embarrassments in the world. So a lot has changed. Why am I mentioning it, and mentioning it with the German foreign minister? If you come in from Sheremetyevo into the center of the city, at a certain point, you're going to see really, it's like a 3-4 story height, these anti-tank barriers. And you see, and then as you're going in, you can see the city, and you see these barriers, and it's on your right-hand side. That's how far the Nazis made it up.
Good.
Okay, and it's a reminder.
Yep.
It's a reminder
Yep.
to anyone that knows anything about history. That's how far it got. Okay,
Yep.
It was only a half a day's more work, and it would have been over.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. They got, and the Muscovites heard the artillery. They heard it very clearly. So it was, that's how far they go. But they had to, if you're going to be a German, you go there, you cannot start lecturing them. And I think that the media, they don't care about any of all that, because they're not even interested in World War II, other than sort of, the Holocaust, and that's it. They don't know anything about any of that, and pretty much they've accepted, something. Oh yeah, well, didn't Stalin and Hitler start World War II together? When they allies or whatever. That's all they really know about it. So, they weren't at all happy with her coming along talking like Willy Brandt, talked. So, but that's the only way you can talk. If you're going to be a German talk to the Russians, you got to knock off lectures, because they are simply not going to take lectures from Germans.
But there's so many interesting ways of trying to put history into context. I don't know if it happens anymore, because there's some veterans are leaving us every single year. But in the early 2000s, a guy named Ben Aris, someone that I used to know, he writes Business New Europe. And he writes on economics all the time. He's very prolific. And I remember saying, Ben, I really like that article about the German veterans going to Volgograd and meeting the survivors of the Great Battle of Stalingrad. And Ben said to me, he said, I write every day and everybody only remembers that one article. And sure, I read economics every day too, but I don't really file it, for long-term memory.
Right.
But it was very moving. It was a very well-written article, and that's putting everything into context. I have some German friends, And before this COVID nonsense started, they would ask me, what is the attitude the Russians have towards Germans? And I said, very respectful. I've never heard a bad thing. Actually, admiration in many ways. Okay. There isn't a national. Russians don't really hate any nationality that I can figure out. Okay, they don't like migrant workers that litter. Okay, they don't like migrant workers that leave a mess behind. Okay, but it's not because they're migrant workers. It's because of what some people do. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's never any kind of national dislike or ethnic dislike. In the case of the Germans, it's when the Germans adopt a tone which doesn't recognize the particular historical problem that the Germans have when they address Russia. So when some German minister says something about Russia, which is kind of insulting, and the Russians get very upset. You can be sure Zaharova is going at her next press briefing, she's going to launch into the Germans and remind them of what we actually did to you, how we threw you out and then chased you down into the wolf's lair in Berlin. So, at the moment you adopt any kind of an insulting tone and accuse the Russians of aggression or whatever, then they come at you. But other than that, they don't have anything personal against Germans. They're perfectly happy with them, just as long as you adopt a properly respectful manner.
Absolutely, as it should be. As it should be.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Any questions coming our way?
Right. Boyan Perko says, I wish other Slav countries were as proud and unforgiving towards the Germans and reminding them of what they've done anytime they begin their lecturing on anything. I think that's a very good point, because
the Poles do it sometimes.
The Poles do it, but the Poles, as we've discussed before, they despise and dislike the Russians more than they do the Germans. Yeah. So they take a lot more crap from the Germans than they should. But I think it's true, particularly among the people in the Balkans. I mean, who take a lot of crap from the Germans and often don't dare to talk back to them. Obviously the Croats, they're very grateful. It was Germany who gave them that independent state, in the 1990s, Danke Deutschland, when they had that TV show, Danke Deutschland. So, not
the best way to reemerge.
No, not at all. Not at all. Danke. Yeah. It was very funny that on that day, on which Germany recognized Croatia, and then Croatia had that TV show, the Danke Deutschland, Serbian national television all day kept running footage of the Germans arriving in Zagreb in 1941. All day on TV, Germans arriving in 1941 in Zagreb. And the Croatians were kind of throwing flowers at the Germans.
But see, it showed how tone deaf the German government was. I mean, right. Wouldn't you expect that kind of reaction?
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
I mean, there's still people alive that remember it.
50 years, boom. Many people are right, because if you're in your 60s, you remember it. So at that time, there were many people who remembered the whole of the Ustasha regime. Yeah, it's a very big deal.
One of the things that George and I are trying to impress here is that, George and I both love history, okay? And it's no mistake what we're talking about this here. But people have to be aware that history is very alive in this part of the world.
That's
and
right.
You don't get that. You have, when I look at the UK, they like to celebrate the imperial times, and the culture that comes
right.
with it, okay?
Right.
And in the US, well, everything is muddled now, okay? Right. You go from the founders to the U.S. was found, the 1619
project, the 1619 project.
Absolute complete fraud, okay? Right. But it's being taught in schools, okay? Yeah. But in this part of the world, it's passed down. It's passed down, and you know, and what is it? The battalion of the defender. What is it? What is it's something that happened about 10 years ago. They have the Victory Day parade.
Oh, the immortal battalion.
Yes. And you get choked up, George. You get choked up because people are carrying pictures, portraits of their ancestors, the grandfathers, great-grandfathers that fought in the war, and these are young people carrying it. I mean, one of the most you know, tear drenching images I had on the last few years in St. Petersburg. They had an assigned route, and someone called up and said, my grandfather, he's an invalid, he cannot walk, but he can make it to the balcony. And they changed the entire route just to go past his balcony. Yeah. That's how important it is.
That's right. And that immortal battalion, remember, Putin himself takes part in that parade of the immortal battalion. So he first delivers his address on May the 9th. Then he takes part in this immortal battalion, and he carries pictures. I'm not sure who the picture is, because I mean his parents.
He lost a brother. He lost a brother.
He lost a brother, but I think he was just a child at the time. But it's not a picture of his brother, because I think it's a grown up. I think he lost uncles as well. I think uncles were lost. His parents were wounded, so you know they barely survived the siege of Leningrad. So he was obviously born afterwards. But yeah, his what would have been his older brother died in the siege of Leningrad. So you know, he was himself, you know, personally, you know, very much affected by World War II. I mean, this isn't just something, you know, the way all those, you know, commentators, the Anne Applebaums and the rest of them, he's just using this, you know, mobilizing nationalism, xenophobia, and whatever. No, he was personally profoundly affected by
I remember kind of a strange point in my television career. I interviewed through satellite uplink Dan Rather, of all people. And it's when Time magazine came and did this big piece on Putin, and it came out, and there was so many factual errors about his birth date, how many people were in his family. I mean, you went all the way here. I mean, I wasn't Time magazine a thing at one point in time. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's still around, but you know, I mean, they invest all the, you know, it was, you know, big names and everything, and you know, and then I remember asking Dan Rather, why can't they even get the date right? And then he said, because Americans believe in freedom. And I just we went from the interview of Time magazine to Vladimir Putin, and then Dan Rather said, but Americans love freedom. We value freedom. And I was sitting next to Sophie Shevardnadze, and she, you know, she looked at me like, is this earpiece working? Okay, he doesn't. He won't even answer our questions. Okay? That's right. We love freedom.
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Says, would Putin be considered to be a boomer? I wouldn't have thought so, Peter. I mean, I think that, I mean, he may be, in terms of his age, yes, I mean, he'd be a boomer, but, you know, in his attitudes, he's the opposite of any kind of self-indulgence. I mean, he's anything about him, like me, you know, I want, I mean, he's just, I can't associate. He's all about, you know, self-sacrifice for the good of the community. That's his attitude.
It's such an interesting question, because like when we use the word boomer, George and I think very you know, a very narrow definition of that term is basically the West, because I had to produce an editor of my program named Lisa, and we were talking about young people in Russia, and her parents impressed upon her and said, you know, we didn't use the word I so often. It wasn't focused on us. It was you know, our group, our family, our society, our nation. You know, it was always about us. And they were kind of sad by the fact, you know, I, me.
Right, exactly. That's right. And with him, everything is really about, you know, what can I do for Russia? You know, in other words, what Russia expects of me. I mean, That's why it's so, he's the exact opposite of a boomer. Anyway, we have another super chat from Antar Das. Says, I'm a part of the US Navy, and even though I just enlisted last year, Ukraine is pointless. But why does the establishment still think it's the Cold War? Very, very good question. Congratulations on enlisting. And thank you for having the courage to take part here and express your views on the
courage.
Definitely courage. Very, very, very much admire you. Absolutely. It's hard to say what America gets out of Ukraine, other than that it's a headache and very painful for Russia. And so if it's bad for Russia, it must be good for us. That seems to be the logic. And why does it still think it's the Cold War? Well, probably there's a lot of people with their snouts in the trough who are making a lot of money out of it. There's all the think tanks, the universities, and, the corporations, the politicians. For them, this is good business. So they it's been a seamless transition since the end of the Cold War.
And also, it's something that George and I have already touched upon. We can just go back to Biden's failed presser. What did the elite media want to talk about? I will say it in my words. They wanted to talk about hegemony, maintaining hegemony, because that's what they were brought up to be the mandarins of the empire, of hegemony, of our, because our value, because they are accredited, credentialed, they fine pedigrees, and this is part of their worldview. I mean, only pesky little white people worry about inflation. Come on, guys, okay? I mean, look at the press corps that asks all of those questions. Do you think any of them care about what the price of gasoline is? Right. Do you think any of them? You think any of them even know?
That's right. But I think there's also in other aspect of it. I do think that contrary to conventional view, the United States sees Russia as its main rival, not China. I mean, that's why hardly any questions of China. And yes, China is an economic giant. Yes, China will eclipse United States as the #1 economic power in the world. That doesn't worry the Americans too much. The economic powers, they know how to deal with it. Like they saw off the threat from Japan. They think, okay, we'll address the China problem down the road. Russia is a serious problem, not just because of its military power, but because of its great diplomatic skill. I mean, it's the anti-US global coalition. It leads the opposition. It's, Nicaragua, whom does Nicaragua look to? It doesn't look to China, looks to Russia for leadership.
But it's something we've talked about before, and I think it is it's a fear that's very deep in their subconscious, is that another model can work.
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked about Orban in Hungary.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Russia is a conservative country. Okay. Right. It is to one degree or another, there's levels of religiosity, and it is genuine. Right. Okay. Veneration of history, respect of your elders. I mean, very traditional, and this is a threat to neoliberalism. And what it not only is it a threat to it, George, it's a way that they can define themselves. We are. Look at how virtuous we are. How awful bad they are. Okay, and what it is that it's reassuring. It reassures their psychosis. Right. Okay, and it's wonderful to have the other. Okay, the West has done that a lot. Okay, right. And sometimes it's just cultural, and then sometimes it goes into the military realm. Right. But it just they're very there are these people, Victoria Newlands and Fiona Hills. They wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat, think Russia.
Exactly. It's right, and it's very interesting because you said the other. But the other is always Russia. I mean, it isn't China. So what if you look at the New York Times, every day they're running something else that we're supposed to hate, and there's always Russia is vaguely behind it. The anti-vaxxers, the anti-vax movement. Who's really behind this? Russia. No real evidence for this, but Russia. The election might go in a way that we don't want. Who's behind this? Russia. there's no unity in NATO. We can't get everyone on board to to wage a war against somebody, Russia in this case. Well, who's behind it? Russia. Russia's sowing divisions. So anything that they don't like in the world, it is Russia that is to blame. And that's the line of in the New York Times, and that's the party of the establishment. So that when they look at, well, who's the chief foe of neoliberalism, that is, it's Russia, and I think Putin has he's given speeches in the past and interviews in the past in which he has offered strong criticisms of neoliberalism. I mean, he said this model isn't working, and people don't like it. And that they don't like. China's never said that. China said, yeah, we want global cooperation, blah blah blah. But Putin has given pointed criticisms, and so I think there's a reason why they're targeting Russia, and I think that they see that as the number one threat to the United States.
But if you look at these low octane thinkers that are making policy and led by the Blinken crowd, they just can't get over the fact. But you were defeated. You were defeated. You were defeated. You must do what we say. You were defeated.
You were defeated. Yeah, no, exactly. That is. Yeah, we won the Cold War. You're trying to rewrite the result of the Cold War. Exactly.
Our values.
That's it. And they say this all the time. Particularly again, New York Times and Washington Post and Politico. What Putin is trying to do is trying to rewrite the history of the post-Cold War world.
They are trying to rewrite
exactly.
History.
That's it, and that's why they say, well, this security architecture that Putin wants to recreate, it undermines the outcome of the Cold War. They lost the Cold War. Who the hell do the Russians think they are, trying to rewrite it?
And George and I have been very emphatic. We even had a Gaggler, a Polish person. I won't mention his name because he hasn't given me permission. But we talked about that. And George and I take the position, and we're both of us are willing to debate our position with anyone, is that we are of the opinion that Russia opted out of the Cold War. Wasn't defeated. It decided Russia would no longer, Soviet Union would no longer participate in it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's right. Anyway, we have another super chat from Darren Levy. Thank you so much, Darren. And then it says, how long do you think it will take for the West to move on from Ukraine and try to use another Baltic state like Estonia or Lithuania in their game? Well, I think a Balkan state, I think Estonia and Lithuania, they're part of NATO, I think, but I think a Balkan state, such as Bosnia-Herzegovina, I think that's quite a possibility. It's certainly a more amenable scenario for the United States than to take on Russia. Taking on Russia is a big problem. That could go very badly. So no question, Russia is in the crosshairs, but it's a very dangerous enterprise. We're speaking of Bosnia-Herzegovina or Serbia, that's doable. America did this in the 1990s. They think they can do it again. I think it's going to be much more difficult to do it now than then, because again, Russia is now very much on the scene as it wasn't then. But I do think that Biden people are they're going to be looking for foreign policy successes, because they're pretty much out of options domestically. So they're going to be looking for some easy foreign policy victories. And I think Bosnia-Herzegovina is very much a kind of a juicy.
George and I talk about this at great length, and we're really lucky because George really has deep knowledge about the destruction of Yugoslavia and the illegal destruction of Yugoslavia. Yeah. Just popping into my head here, Lavrov is probably laughing at his meetings with Blinken. It's just a total waste of time. But George is absolutely right, and we've talked about this here on the Gaggle, is that I definitely think the Biden, with the state of the Biden administration domestically, they are looking for something. Bosnia-Herzegovina would be something that they would very much like to get, because it's all laid out. The Western audience has already been conditioned to hate Serbs. So check that box. That's OA. Okay. And then, revisionist here. Changing borders, even though it was NATO powers that created those borders, but they don't tell you that. Okay. They're violating the Dayton agreements, Yeah, but the Dayton agreements were shoved down their throat by using bombs. Okay. And then say, integration of military unit. No, there was nothing in the agreement about that.
That's right.
Over and over. George, go check. We've done dozens.
A number of those. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's would be a very useful pivot away from Russia, because what the Biden people have now done, they've got themselves into this confrontation in Ukraine. Very dangerous thing to do, because again, the United States has been very successful in the past taking on small, weak powers that are incapable of fighting back. And that's, to be fair, you look at great powers, that's what great powers do. You fight wars that you're going to win. Often those wars don't go particularly well, just like the British, they fought the Boer War. They fought a number of wars, they always fought poorly. But they prevailed in the end, but they fought badly. The same with America. They prevail in the end, but they fight badly. But you don't want to fight another great power. That's suicidal. That guarantees that you stop being a great power.
Exactly. And that's why I've said, and I hope I'm proven right, is that this whole Stoltenberg's whole gamble here, his whole gambit here, it's going to see at least the beginning of the end of NATO, not the expansion of it. You heard it here. You heard it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, and that's why again, these people like Blinken, Biden are remarkably incompetent, because, and as we talked about yesterday, you have to think though that had Trump been around, Trump would have avoided this particular confrontation. I mean, again, Trump failed in many aspects of his foreign policy. Hard to believe that he would have got himself into this mess with Russia over Ukraine. I mean, there would have been a certain common sense that we would say this is nuts. This is something that's really important to them, not very important to us. This is not something we want to get into a fight about. Pick your battles. This isn't our battle.
And I think it's fair for George and I to assume that Donald Trump doesn't know a whole lot about Ukraine. Most people don't. However, his lawyer, Giuliani, probably told him, what's going on in Ukraine right now? What's going on with Hunter and all these carpetbaggers, and who's the most corrupt of them all? I mean, Trump probably got an earful because he wanted to hear what was going on. So he got a real short course in modern Ukrainian history. Yes. I would well imagine, George.
No, I'm sure that's right. And all of those people, those Masha and others, were all busy plotting against him. I mean, there's a whole Ukrainian contingent. Remember, the Ukrainians, even in the 2016 election, were already plotting against him. They didn't want him elected. So when he heard about what Masha and all of those people in the Ukrainian embassy were doing, we can, they say, this is really bad news.
And particularly during that impeachment process, George and I just were breathless. I mean, the description of Ukraine that they were giving the American people is just like, wow. I mean, they don't even try to be nuanced about it. Right. Okay. Right. And the Republicans, the boneheads that they are, didn't even ask any hard questions.
Yes. No, that's right. It's an amazing thing that there they are. It's like they can't get out of their system their kind of their rabid Russophobia. Still, comes from the Cold War and then everything else. So they're still all the whole line of attack now against Biden is, whoa, hey, you're letting Putin invade Ukraine. What was it? That woman, the one that you like, that Australian woman, Miranda Devine. I think she was on some show yesterday.
I saw it.
Yeah, and she said, "Oh well, I saw Sergei Lavrov, and he was licking his lips. Like completely pathological, licking his lips. With a knife and fork. We're gonna carve up Ukraine."
But see, that's such a perfect example of what I said earlier. Is that Miranda Devine? She got the laptop and she wrote a book about it, and it's a pretty good book. Okay, why do these people feel that they have the cachet to start talking about things that they have no knowledge of whatsoever, except for say what everybody else says? Okay, exactly. And George and I privately have talked about Miranda Devine. I mean, I like her. I like her as a guest. It's substantive for the most part. And then I just get so disappointed. It's like Laura Trump coming on and talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and it's like, okay.
But I think that's an excellent point. Again, you've got these people such as Miranda Devine, and she does a lot of good stuff. I mean, a lot of good work. I mean, not just on the laptop from hell. I mean, she's done very good work on the border and the open border in the U.S. But she's not able to make the transition, as Tucker Carlson says. Why are we worrying about the Ukraine border when our own border is open for business, open for an invasion? I mean, in fact, you have to have your priorities. And yet somehow, something goes off in their head, and they start getting agitated about something that doesn't affect them in any way whatsoever, what's going on in the southeast of Ukraine.
Okay, another media commentary. Some of our viewers, some of our gagglers may have watched Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty on The Hill and Rising. And then they went off on their own. There's something called Breaking Points. And I basically like it because it's a lot of news, okay, and not just pure opinion, though they do give their opinions. And Sagar, which he used to work as a correspondent at the Pentagon, which he likes to talk about a lot, he gave a monologue on Ukraine that just my jaw hit the floor. I mean, it was so awful. It was so terribly awful. It was so disappointing to me because, when you're talking about, nuances of the conservative movement, all that, and you get this story so wrong, why should I believe you on these other things? I was really depressed by it, okay? He was talking about rebels. I mean, and it was the Ukrainian government that are the rebels. And then he said something that really, really hit me hard. He said, Russian society is a joke.
He said
that. Sagar, you talk about your Indian ancestry a lot. Would you like anyone to come on your program and say Indian society is a joke? Yeah. I mean, where's the introspection here? Why would you say that? Because everybody says it. Yeah. And you and Crystal are supposed to say something different and unique and thoughtful. And you both fall into the same trap as the rest of them.
Yeah, no, that's a very good example. Exactly. So here's somebody who, on many things is sensible enough. And then he just goes off the rail. It's very strange. It's something that's the way their brains are wired, that they're unable really ever to get out of this mindset. And particularly when here in the United States, you have a very long tradition on the right of being anti-interventionist. I mean, Tucker Carlson and Pat Buchanan both tap into that long tradition, the kind of isolationist, anti-interventionist tradition. And it's amazing that they're completely oblivious to all of that. I mean, there was a time when Republicans thought this is a really bad idea. We don't need to get into these wars that have nothing to do with the United States.
But see, one of the problems, and now I know it in retrospect because I'm out of it, but when I was at undergraduate and graduate school, taking political science classes, international relations, comparative politics, when you step aside and you look at it in its total, it's really very little science. It's about protecting and furthering empire of the of hegemony, and it's so patently obvious when you stand back and look at it. Okay, you can come up with all your models and crunch numbers and all of this, but what you're doing is you're perpetuating a mindset. Okay, and reinforcing it by, well, we got the numbers here. Here's a chart. Okay, it must be true. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And it's much more of an ideological approach than it is any kind of, I mean, John Mearsheimer is a huge exception, huge. Right. Okay, and that's why you never hear from him, you never see him. Okay. Right. Because he'll demolish that entire psychotic view of world affairs.
Right, but that's you're right. That's a very interesting thing. I mean, why don't we hear more from John Mearsheimer? Because even Tucker Carlson, he's never had John Mearsheimer on. He used to invite on Stephen Cohen, but again, why not Mearsheimer? And it's like, it's very interesting that they just have a very narrow range of guests. So it's like, okay, what's his name now? The Douglas, is it?
Douglas McGregor.
Douglas. Yeah, I was going to say Douglas MacArthur. I thought, no, that can't be right. Douglas McGregor. And that's kind of about it. And Glenn Greenwald. And then you think, well, there are other people who are sensible. Obviously, Mearsheimer, major foreign policy thinker, who can, contribute. I mean, yeah, I know Hannity is just going to have these mindless hacks, and even Ingram, she'll have Mike Pompeo on and everything.
Oh, but are they dating? Are they dating?
Looks like it. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Oh my God, my skin crawls every time that guy is.
What's the deal with him? He's lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, I think he went vegan.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
Oh, I thought you actually knew this. Yeah, but he kind of looks very weird now with this very thin look. I mean, I always detested him, but at least he had that kind of portly.
Yeah, he had an oafish kind of nature to him.
Yeah, exactly. But now that he's kind of lean and hungry, he kind of looks quite scary. You think,
well, hey, maybe he did the Clinton thing. Bill got off the junk food. I mean, Bill's very, very, fragile.
Now, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's right.
But that could be the result of living with Hillary for so many years.
But he also, I think, he's had heart problems. I mean,
Clinton had a double bypass.
Yeah, exactly. So, I wonder whether that was, that has something to do with it. They cut him off everything, cut him off all food and stuff. So
yeah, just rice and bananas for that guy.
But you may be right. I mean, that he and Ingram are dating because they're always on there. And always
creepy.
Yeah, very creepy. Okay. All right, Peter, you wanna wrap it up? How do you feel?
Yeah, I got to take the dogs out here. Everybody, George is going to be on Crosstalk tomorrow, so please watch us on Monday. I want to tell everybody, and I'll probably put it on Facebook here, because of Omicron, RT has gone back into lockdown. And it's more because, and I completely agree with it, one of the great things about what Russian companies do, state companies and private, is they look after their elderly. And so we have a number of, particularly like cameramen and stuff like that are past their retirement age. But if they want to stay working, you can stay, okay, because we're family. And so out of protecting them because of their age, we've decided that we're going to take at least a week off. And so I will do a recording on Sunday, and then on Monday, and then on Wednesday. It'll be a very strange week because the editing, because I'll be sitting at home and my editor is going to have to do it from home. It's a lot longer to do. So I want to tell everybody, I'm going to try to talk about broad issues because it's going to, the editing, post-production is going to be a lot longer. Usually it's 20 minutes. Now it'll be 8 hours. Okay. So I will see George have a couple of drinks, relax. Okay. And George always looks like he's come from church on Sunday when he comes.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. The few times ever in my life, I actually put a tie on. So that's, I don't know how to tie a bow tie. I never learned how to tie a bow tie, but this is the few times I ever actually wear a tie because I want crosstalk.
I will give a tutorial on the gaggle and how to tie a bow tie. Okay. All righty. All right, everybody. As you all know, this is our tradition here. We appreciate everyone that's come by. Questions are always good. And George and I love a good chat.
All right, but before we you've got another super chat from Flying Boar. Thank you so much. Update on Kazakhstan. Well, I mean, I think from what I've gathered is that you know, the forces have been withdrawn, and you know, order has more or less been restored. I think it's a big victory for the Collective Security Treaty Organization. I mean, it moved very quickly, and it did what it needed to do, which is, you know, secure all the strategic posts. The government was able then to use its own internal security forces to restore order, and then it was withdrawn. So
okay, but
that's my understanding. I mean, you have anything else?
Well, what we need to watch now, everybody, is the bulldogs under the carpet, okay? Because the Nazarbayev clan is being displaced, okay? And I think because of Russian assistance, which was very gratefully accepted, I think the Russians are saying, you guys got to clean up house, okay? Because we want to do this on a regular basis, okay?
Right.
Because basically it's a power struggle within the elites, and some of those elites, and George and I will give more information on this later, had foreign entanglements, if you know. I mean, one of them actually had a picture with Joe Biden and his son, okay?
Right.
Connecting dots here, okay?
Yes.
So cleaning house in these kind of clannish environments, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like Tony calls in the guys. It's going to be a purge, and that's where it's going to happen over the next few. It's happening now, and it will happen. And hopefully it stays quiet, peaceful, and the neighborhood is calm, because there's another part of the neighborhood that ain't so calm, if you know what I mean. So
right. No,
we're going to keep an eye on it.
Right. No, I think you know, those excellent points, and I think that clearly the, you know, Kazakhstan's policy of, you know, playing both sides off against the middle hasn't worked out.
End game.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark Levine would say, I'm done. Okay.
Exactly. So
all I can say is, you know, the NGOs find another place to meddle. Okay.
Right.
Now, and that was the Nazarbayev regime. That was one of their biggest single mistakes. Okay.
Right.
Saying, you know, we're going to be friends with everybody. No, your friends have malicious intent. We found that out.
That's exactly. Not unlike what happened in Armenia, where you had Pashinyan, which also tried to play this little game, flirting with the West, and, you know, playing that off against Russia. Then, hey, he suddenly realized he needed Russia badly, because otherwise he was facing a military catastrophe. So
I told my Armenian friends, you can't have both. You have to choose. Okay, you have to choose. And Armenians particularly, they know what it means to possibly not exist.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very few people experience that on that intense level. It is possible to be extinguished, okay? And so don't take these, you know, cheap, shiny little things that they flash in front of you, okay? Because it's not good for you at all, because it is an absolute existential threat. And I think they've learned that the hard way, George.
Yeah, I absolutely right. It's a kind of an interesting arc, you know, with Kazakhstan, Armenia, and, you know, also Lukashenko in Belarus, you know, also that clever little game of, you know, hey, I'll be, you know, played with the West, and then, you know, get all Russia, you know, yay, you know, the West, they don't have good feelings towards you. They you know, they don't have good intent towards you. So, you don't want to go down that path.
You're a means to an end. That's it.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. This is the Gaggle, and we're on local. So please go to thegaggle.locals.com. As you just saw, we finished our super chat on YouTube. We made it, George. So far, good. Okay. Please go to the store. George has a weekly live stream.
Exactly. Live stream Thursdays, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time. Always a lot of fun, and, you know, very enjoyable. Come with all criticisms, suggestions, ideas, questions. Everything is welcome. Then after it's over, can head off to the bar. But before you do that, replenish that tip jar, because those dogs are hungry.
Buddy.
Yeah,
say goodbye to hello and goodbye to everybody.
That tip jar is, he's very, very
looking for it. It's empty. He's looking for it.
That's right. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.